Hey, welcome back to room 237. This is John. Kind of coming at you with another collection discussion video. This might be the last one I do for a while because I just want to go back to reviewing stuff. And it's kind of fitting because this is the biggest collection of its kind that I can do. Whether it be. Actually, this is the first one I've done of an actor. So far, it's just been directors. But this is my favorite actor of all time. Um, I've been collecting his movies for about 5 years. I've always known who he was. I've always seen him and stuff. Like when I was a kid, I recognized him. When I was in high school, there was a couple movies I really liked. There was one I was obsessed with. But then, just up until just a few years ago, I just really got into his movies, what kind of actor he is, which I'll get into, and just the characters he portrays. And this is definitely the biggest collection. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because this is probably going to be a long ass video. Because there's about 30 movies here that I'm going to be talking about, so get comfortable. Robert De Niro, that's who it is. I could have said it normally, I guess, but Robert De Niro, that's who it is. He's a guy, he has a very long body of work. He worked for a long time. I think his first movie was called something about the bachelor party or the wedding party in the early 60s. And all the way up until the early 70s, he had acted consistently, but it was mostly just crap. Stuff that never took off, never got any kind of notice, never made any money. But then in the early 70s, he or the late 60s, at some time he went to some sort of school. It wasn't Lee Strasberg. I can't remember the name of the other person. But they taught method acting. And those that don't know what method acting is, it's when an actor uses whatever method possible to truly become that character. Mentally, physically, whatever. Just embody that character. And he really got into that, and once that started happening, there was some sort of ball was going. And then he was recognized by Martin Scorsese, and then that's where he really took off. I'll go more into examples of how crazy because he's one of the most, next to Daniel Day-Lewis, he's probably the most widely known as the method actor that goes to extreme lengths to become a character. Of course, first I'll talk about these aren't going to be in chronological order, because there's actually a lot of movies I've seen that I don't have. There's a lot from the 80s I don't have. There's a lot from the 80s I haven't seen. But the 70s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, he's just been in crap, which I'll get to. But my favorite movie of his, like that he stars in, and my favorite character of his, my favorite performance of his, is Taxi Driver. I've talked about this on my random favorites video. Just a absolutely lonely, depressed Vietnam vet who can't sleep, so he becomes a nighttime cabbie. And he becomes obsessed with this one girl who rejects him. Then he becomes obsessed with guns, the filth and the city of New York. Becomes obsessed with Jodie Foster, who plays like a 12-year-old prostitute, and saving her, getting her out of that life. For this role, this was after he won the Oscar for another film I'll get into. He actually got a cabbie license and worked as a cab driver for like a year. This came out in 76. He listened to these audio recordings of this assassination attempt by, I cannot remember who. And, he locked himself away. He deprived himself of sleep. And he kind of drove himself crazy. In fact, there's a scene where Scorsese's the passenger and he's asking about if he sees the woman in the window. And he just got these dark bags under his eyes and he's not responding to the guy. He's really slow. He's actually sleep deprived. It was really late at night, but it helped. I mean, you really think DeNiro is going crazy in this. I was obsessed with this movie in high school. I still love it to death. Another one I saw in high school is actually part of a film class, and I still think it's one of the greatest films ever made. Raging Bull. Now, I'm not a sports guy at all, but I do like boxing. And I do like boxing movies. And Raging Bull is the best of its kind. And there's another Scorsese film like Taxi Driver. Those two have done 8 movies together. I've seen 7. I've seen 7. I own 7 of them. New York, New York, I haven't seen. That's a musical with Liza Minnelli. I'm not really crazy about that. All stuffy. In this, it takes place in the 40s, and then in the 60s. He plays Jake LaMotta. It's a true story about a guy who just, his anger, his jealousy, just destroys his legacy of becoming a truly great boxer. There's great features on this too. And, you know, he learned how to box. He trained with the real Jake LaMotta. So, you know, he was in peak physical condition. And there's no pictures, unfortunately, but to play the older Jake LaMotta, they stopped filming for like 4 months and he ate nothing but pasta and bread and he gained 63 pounds. So, I mean, he has a belly, he's all big. They were actually concerned for his health. He won the Oscar for Best Actor for this, which he deserved. And, you know, there's actually a scene where he accuses her. He's always accusing her of cheating. And there's a part where he even accuses his brother, Joe Pesci, which is the first time you see them together. My favorite on-screen duo. He even goes so far as to accusing him of sleeping with her. And De Niro was so good at doing this behind-the-camera stuff to get reactions that would enhance the performance of his co-stars. So when he asks him, he's like, "Did you fuck my wife?" The reaction Joe Pesci gives was like, "What?" He actually asked him, "Did you fuck your mother?" So that's why he gave that reaction. He's always doing little tricks like that to enhance his co-stars. But then, you know, he goes over to his house to beat him up because he really thinks, because she just admits to it. You know, spoiler alert, she can't take it. It's not true. But then after he beats up Joe Pesci, he actually really did punch her and knock her out. You know, of course, afterwards he was like, "Are you okay?" But he really went to whatever length possible. And the weight gain in this is known as one of the most extreme body transformations in all of film. But this is a truly remarkable movie. And probably my third favorite, because, I mean, I'll always have a thing for Taxi Driver. The next movie I'll talk about is my favorite Scorsese film, and one of my favorite films overall. A Raging Bull is really a testament to filmmaking. Next, I've already talked about, that's Goodfellas. He's a supporting character, but, you know, he plays Jimmy Conway, who is based on Jimmy... Oh, what the fuck is his name? I can't remember his real name now. It's gonna kill me. I guess he called him like every day, or he called the real Henry Hill, which is Ray Liotta's character, just for stupid shit like, how did Jimmy smoke a cigarette? And just, he was that anal about his characters. I've already talked about this a lot in my gangster countdown. I'm I talked a lot of these I've already talked about because a lot of them are gangster films. But another one of my truly favorite films and one of his best performances is in The Godfather 2. One of my favorite scenes in all of cinema, I mentioned before, is when he has that towel wrapped around his hand with the pistol. All his scenes, he speaks in Sicilian. He lived in Italy for like a year. He learned the language, the dialect, and how to speak like Marlon Brando. This is the movie he won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor before Taxi Driver. But he didn't think he'd win because he never had any good notices as an actor. So he didn't show up. I don't know who collected it for him. But, you know, he's truly remarkable in this movie as well. And as powerful as Pacino's performance is as Michael in this film, normally flashbacks can kind of drag down. I was always excited when another flashback came because I love seeing DeNiro as a very humble, nice Sicilian guy, but who's also very intimidating. And like I said, this is like watching fine art. This is like a divine movie. For me and for a lot of people like who love film or gangster movies. Godfather 2 is absolutely fantastic. Casino, this was the last movie he did with Scorsese, which sucks because it was back in 95. This is one of the last movies where you can tell like he gives a shit. Because by the late 90s and early 2000s, there's some movies, I'll get into that, where he just seems like he's phoning it in. He's not enthusiastic. In this, he's kind of like that, but there's more scenes than not where he's actually trying. Again, I love that tagline, no one stays at the top forever. It's mostly the scenes with her when she starts doing all her bullshit. Or like with her ex-boyfriend played by James Woods. But this is still a very good movie. Another movie he was nominated for an Oscar for, which was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What the hell was... Oh, 7. He was nominated for an Oscar 7 times. He won Supporting Actor once, Best Actor once. This is one he was nominated for Supporting. That's Cape Fear. Another Scorsese film. So far, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Casino, Goodfellas. This and the next two, he all did with Scorsese. About this guy. This is actually a remake of a 60s movie with Gregory Peck and I cannot remember the other guy's name. It's right there too. I do like Gregory Peck though. He's this guy, he's a sadistic rapist, but his lawyer, Nick Nolte, he had evidence that could have got him a lighter sentence and he neglected to use it, so he wasted away for 4 years. Well, not really wasted away, he bulked himself up. And so when he gets out, he just stalks this family from the inside out. And normally, I don't like it when actors do accents. It just kind of bothers me. His southern accent, it takes a while to get used to for me. By the end of the movie, by the time he's just rambling and ranting and talking really fast, it is effective. Like in the beginning, when he leaves the prison, they're like, "What about all your books?" It's just like, read them. It just, it's not that great. But he is a fucking creep in this movie. He does it very well. He bulked himself up for this movie. There's, like, you see him in jail in the beginning, like, doing sit-ups and pull-ups. And later on, he has to take his shirt off for, like, a strip search for the cops because Nick Nolte's getting suspicious of him. And, you know, he's in peak condition again, and he had the idea to just put all these tattoos on his body about justice and vengeance, and Bible quotes and everything. Did he really do anything other than just bulk himself up? But like at the end where he's like talking in tongues and he thinks he's in a courtroom with God and he's just ranting, it is pretty good. And some of the shit he does to this family, like you see him actually holding on to like the CV shaft of a car while they're driving. It's pretty crazy, which he actually did do. He wanted to prove it first that someone could actually do that. It turns out you can. But yeah, if you like psychological thrillers with just a fucked up person stalking and hunting people, this is a good movie. This one is highly underrated. No one ever talks about this movie. And I think this is one of my favorite De Niro performances, and that is The King of Comedy. This came out shortly after Raging Bull. He was sort of known as like a Hollywood badass, whether he be a boxer or a gangster or, a non-vet. Here he just gets to play a schmuck. He just gets to let everything fly. He plays this guy named Rupert Pupkin, he's obsessed with stardom and fame, but mostly Jerry Lewis's character, with Jerry Lewis is a comedy legend. Jerry Lewis is like this talk show host, this late night talk show host that everybody loves. He's obsessed with him. He keeps trying to get into his studio to show him his comedy tape, but it just doesn't work out for him. And it's like if you take Taxi Driver, do like a parody of Taxi Driver, but about a guy who wants to be a comedian. It's kind of like that. He just becomes obsessed. Eventually he has to kidnap the guy and pretty much hold him hostage to get onto the show. It's pretty much also a parody of how people really look at celebrities, how obsessed they get. Actually, this scene here where he's got the gun to his head, because Jerry Lewis is Jewish, and there's a part where he had to get really angry. So De Niro was throwing anti-Semitic remarks at him behind the camera to just get him pissed off, and it worked. And actually, at the end, you get to see his comedy routine, which I don't know if he wrote it, then good for him, because it's actually pretty fucking funny. I like the jokes in it. But you get a lot of scenes where it's like he's talking to himself, but like he's having a conversation with Jerry Lewis, but it's in his imagination. So you get to see this one-sided thing he's doing, and he does it very well. I think Scorsese said that this is his favorite performance of De Niro's in his films. Very underrated. No one ever talks about this movie, and it's a shame, because I think this is a great Robert De Niro film. And then the first of the De Niro Scorsese team-ups is Mean Streets, which is a good gangster flick. I don't like it as much as other people do, but I still like it very much. It's actually a Harvey Keitel movie. De Niro just has a supporting role as Johnny Boy, who is just like this. Who would you compare him to? He's kind of like this guy who he rips people off. He can never pay him back. He's always playing with guns and cherry bombs and starting fights. He's just a loose cannon. But even in the beginning of the movie, there's a part where he's telling the story about how he's playing jacks or he's playing cards, trying to get money back. And he just goes on and on. He's like, so I told him this, what I'm going to do. And he does it very well. I wish he was in the movie more, though. So, other than Godfather 2, these are all the ones I have of De Niro and Scorsese. Again, New York is not anything I'm ready to see at this time. So these are all random ones. And they sort of go somewhat in an order of how I like them. So down at the bottom we'll get to the shit. Once Upon a Time in America, which is now on Netflix. So please go check this out. Great movie. Some scenes, it doesn't feel like he's doing very much, but that very long rape scene and then how he acts after is extremely powerful. One of my favorite gangster movies, very underseen, under talked about film. It's close to 4 hours, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's on Netflix, so if you're interested in gangster flicks, Robert De Niro, or like Italian made films, definitely check this out, because it's very fucking good. I think it's one of the greatest films ever made, and nobody talks about it. It's just too long and too convoluted for me to talk to. This one I think he won a Golden Globe for, but people don't really talk about it. Midnight Run. He's a bounty hunter who has to go after Charles Grodin, who's pretty much this neurotic, talkative, annoying guy, while De Niro's kind of this badass bounty hunter. It's kind of like a buddy cop movie, but only one of them's in law enforcement. The FBI get involved, the mob gets involved, another hitman keeps intervening. It is pretty funny. It's an underrated comedy. The chemistry between De Niro and Grodin is great. I can't remember. Joe Pantoliano is the guy that De Niro works for. He's the Italian with the glasses that wears the hairpiece on the Goonies. He rants and raves a lot in this movie, and he's just funny to listen to. But yeah, just a really fun, sort of tough guy with sort of a wussy guy. The chemistry, and it's like a road trip, cross-country movie. It's pretty good. I really like it anyway. This movie took me forever to find. It's actually on YouTube. And I actually watched it on my TV through my PlayStation on YouTube before I was finally able to find it. This Boy's Life. One of the earliest films with DiCaprio. Like, I think DiCaprio was like 13. He plays a guy named Tobias Wolff, who's actually an author. It's based on his autobiography. Takes place in Concrete, Washington, I think it is. His mom marries De Niro. Takes place in the 50s. De Niro seems to be a very even-keel guy, but as the film goes on, he becomes more and more emotionally and physically abusive, mainly towards DiCaprio. He does well with the Canadian accent, or the Washington accent, I guess. It sounds Canadian. But he does things like he makes him get a paper run, but he keeps all his money. He wants to play basketball for school, but he won't let him buy shoes with his paper money. So he slips and slides in his regular shoes, and he beats him up quite a bit. If you want to see an abusive parent movie with De Niro, I mean, De Niro, he's like an alcoholic. He's always smoking cigarettes. He's an asshole in this movie, but he does it well. And DiCaprio, this was, I think, a year before Gilbert Grape. But even then, he showed potential for acting. I really do like this movie. This is another one that's really good that people don't talk about. Again, this one was on my list of gangster films. This was the first one he directed, Bronx Tale, where he works for the city. Chaz Palminteri is the local mob boss. De Niro's son looks up to the mob boss, and De Niro wants him to have nothing to do with him. De Niro's not really in the movie that much. I guess he had to focus more on directing. But the scenes De Niro is in, it is pretty much classic De Niro. He still gives a shit. Another movie he was nominated for an Oscar for, Deer Hunter. Sort of a different movie. And believe it or not, this came out just a few months before Apocalypse Now. So this is the first Vietnam movie. So if you like movies that depict Vietnam, check this out. Thing is, I know I once said that movie length doesn't bother me. This is 3 hours and 3 minutes. It feels longer. There's a lot of slow ass scenes in this. But again, there's not a lot of... He was nominated for Best Actor, but other than the Russian roulette scene in the Viet Cong, the POW camp, there's not really a whole lot of great De Niro acting. It's just, it feels like a Robert De Niro movie. But it's young De Niro, and he still had drive, and I don't really want to say that. I don't know how I want to word it. But you also got Meryl Streep, Christopher Walken, John Cazale. Unfortunately, this was the last movie John Cazale was in. He played Fredo in Godfather 1 and 2. But, I mean, this is a very good movie. Directed by Michael Cimino, so it's Italian filmmaking, much like Once Upon a Time in America. It just feels really slow. Like, hopefully you're awake when you see it. These two I'm just going to hold up at the same time. Analyze this and analyze that. This was an honorable mention in my... Was it comedy or gangster? I don't remember. You know, I think Robert De Niro does a good job at playing a gangster with PTSD who has to... keeps going after Billy Crystal to fix him. You get some great Harold Ramis jokes and direction in this. This one, though, it feels really silly. Like, over the top silly. But if you ever want to see De Niro just break out into West Side Story, then there's that. You know, Harold Ramis, may he rest in peace, but on that, there's not much to say. I really like this one. This one, not so much. It has its moments, but it's not as good. This one needs to actually be way higher. Holy shit, because this is a phenomenal movie. Another one he was nominated for an Oscar for. I don't know who he lost to, but holy shit. They better have made one hell of a performance. That is Awakenings, based on a true story. One, you get a tremendous performance by Robin Williams. One of his most laid-back performances. One of his most toned-down, solemn performances. As this doctor who wants to make this drug to help catatonic people wake up. And eventually the drug works, and they do wake up and get their life back, but unfortunately it's only for a certain amount of time, and then they go back to being catatonic. Robin Williams, he's very introverted and shy, but he's very sweet, much like the real Robin Williams, who we all miss. De Niro is just... I actually think he hung out at a few homes for people with this sort of condition. And study like their movements, because you know when he's catatonic, things he does with his face, and like when he develops tics, like when he starts going back, you know, he gets like these tics where he shakes a lot, and then there's a part where he can't sit still, and De Niro really sells it. And you know, it takes a while for his part to come in, but, you know, when he's awakening and he's talking very slow, and then when he's like fully awake and functional, but then when he starts getting all the tics and resorting, like, he put a lot into this. And U.S. Magazine said, De Niro gives one of the most dynamic performances of his powerhouse career. Very true. Directed by Penny Marshall, who passed away recently. It's also a very sad movie. I mean, I don't feel ashamed admitting I got emotional during it. There's a woman, who is it? I can see her right there, but I can't see her face. It's a part with their dancing. He he says, I have to. He can't sit still. He's telling her, I have to go. I probably won't be able to talk to you anymore. So she grabs his hands and they start dancing together, and he stops shaking. But he has this. He does a lot with his face in this movie. It's hard to explain. I think this is on Netflix also. If you can get a hold of this, check it out. This is one of his best performances. It is kind of slow, but it's worth it once he gets into it. I'm not a very optimistic person, but this is a very uplifting movie. It's sad at the end, but also if you love Robin Williams and Robert De Niro, they both give dynamic performances. This actually needs to go higher. I cannot fucking believe it was that low. Such a great movie. This is another good one. This is also on Netflix, so please check it out. This came out in '95. I'm not a big action guy, but this one works because bank heists, which work. But this is known for the first time Pacino and De Niro were ever on screen together, and that is Heat. And yes, I do have a Pacino collection, but I put it with De Niro because I think he's more of the... I think he's the bigger character in it. Because they were both in this together, but two different time periods. They never shared screen time. This one they do. And their careers have always been compared to each other. Both known for playing gangsters. Both very serious method actors. And now they're finally together. Val Kilmer even gives a good performance. De Niro is like this bank heist guy. They all wear hockey masks and guns and shit. Pacino is this sort of hard-boiled detective. This is when Pacino starts hamming it up. It's like, and why do you remember her? Because she has a great ass. Yeah, Pacino does ham it up quite a bit, but it's still a good Pacino role. De Niro, he's just like this calm, cool, collected guy that just runs this gang. Guys that are really good at heists. It's good at, like, the whole third act is just non-stop, hitting the bank, getting away from the cops, gunfights. Written and directed by Michael Mann, who's actually a really big action guy. Like, he did Public Enemies with Johnny Depp. Other ones. This is one that used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore, but that is The Score. This is 2001. This is sort of when De Niro, he was working a lot, but it just seems like he's playing not super interesting characters. Like he's just kind of there. He plays a guy, he's like a safecracker. He works for Marlon Brando. This was Brando's last film. So this film is probably more sentimental or significant for me because you have both Godfathers. You have old Vito and young Vito. The only fictional character to have two different actors win the Oscar for. But he teams up with Edward Norton, who's another actor I really like, to steal this sort of scepter from a museum. Edward Norton actually gives a better performance because he plays a regular guy, but then he has to pretend to be mentally disabled when he goes to the museum. But the movie itself is better than De Niro's performance, I will say that. I know there's a series of these movies and I don't give a shit. Because this is the only one I like, and that's Meet the Parents. They should have stopped after this. Meet the Fockers, I don't care about. Little Fockers, I've seen parts of it, and it looks stupid as shit. I think he was nominated for a Golden Globe for this, too. He gives a good performance in this. You can tell he's having fun being the intimidating, angry guy that no one will ever be good enough for his daughter. And then this goofy Ben Stiller comes in. Jay Roach, what does he direct? I don't remember. I always have fun with Meet the Parents. Just the reactions he gives Ben Stiller, like when they're at the dinner table, he's talking about milking the cat, and he's just like, scenes like that is what sells it for me. Alright, now we're we'll talk about these first, then we'll get into sort of the bad ones. The last one I have, he was nominated for an Oscar for, was Silver Linings Playbook, which it is a romance drama comedy, but I love this movie to death. I would call it like a chick flick, but with the guy, like it's more about the guy, what he goes through to try and get his ex back, but he finds love again. It's for people who struggle with mental disorders, various types of depression and anxiety, like I do, like my girlfriend does. That's why we like this movie quite a bit. Bradley Cooper, I think this is his best movie that I've seen. DeNiro plays his dad, and this came out in 2012? 2013. And the reason why they gave him this role is because it's sort of a Scorsese role. You know, he gets mad, he yells, he has passion. And we haven't seen that in years. I think this is a fantastic, great movie. And I'm not a guy that gives a shit about romance and flicks. And I think this movie's very well done, well performed. This should have gotten the praise and attention that fucking Twilight got. Like, this is like The Notebook, but for real people. Like, I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, you can like The Notebook and shit like that all you want, or The Vow, all that Nicholas Sparks shit. This is realistically what it's like. If you want to find romance and heartache and shit like that, yes, not everybody is like these characters, but whatever. He was only in one scene, but I did not know he was in this. That's American Hustle, which I think is a perfect movie. Bradley Cooper does well, so does Christian Bale. We had Robert De Niro's only in one scene, but I figured I'd mention it. It was a nice surprise to see him in this. And then he was in Jackie Brown, Tarantino film, which is kind of disappointing because I was thinking, oh, Tarantino, having Robert De Niro in a Tarantino movie, that's gonna be fucking awesome. But most of the movie, like, he barely has any lines. It's mostly just him going, yeah. Just that thing De Niro does. He always has that. And just how he just kind of, yeah. It's not up until like the third act when the main event of the movie's going down does he actually do something. But I still like it. It's still a good Tarantino movie. Alright, now we're getting down to the not so good ones. Here, I first saw this when I was first getting into Robert De Niro a few years ago. That is Killing Season. Basically, I don't know if this war ever happened or not. Some war in Bosnia. He was a guy on the American side. They were ordered to kill all the troops on the Bosnian side. He purposely chose to not kill him, but Travolta has it out for him. He spends, I think he says 18 years trying to find out who he is. Then they meet up, they sort of become friends, and then they're out in the woods and they're pretty much hunting each other. Throughout the film, each one gets a chance to get the upper hand over the other one. De Niro, he he does what he can. Travolta's Bosnian accent isn't that great. I had fun watching Robert De Niro. For a movie that came out after 2010, I mean, this was 2013. This is one of the better ones. But this was filmed down in Rabun County, Georgia, where I have family down there. And this actually the same woods and the same river that the movie Deliverance was filmed on. So that's kind of cool. My cousin actually down there said she got to see John Travolta. De Niro kind of was in his trailer. Not a bad movie, just not one of the best. Kind of forgettable. This is one I actually do like. No one ever talks about it. It's kind of underrated. I actually used to work with a guy that thought this was the worst De Niro film. And De Niro's his favorite actor too, and that is The Fan. Actually, this came out in '96, the same year that Jim Carrey's Cable Guy came out. It's kind of the same thing. Robert De Niro is this die-hard baseball fan. Wesley Snipes is a guy that he was on one team, but then he gets transferred to Robert De Niro's favorite team and becomes his favorite player. And he just starts stalking the guy. You know, he puts him in front of his family. He even leaves his son at the stadium so he can go do something. You got John Leguizamo, who's great. A Benicio del Toro in a young role. Actually, this is how crazy De Niro is in this movie. Benicio del Toro has a number, but that used to be Wesley Snipes' number on the other team. And when Snipes transfers, he has like a losing streak. So he keeps asking him, he was like, do you mind trading the number? And Del Toro keeps telling him, no, that's my number. He even has it branded on him. So Robert De Niro even kills Del Toro, cuts the brand off it, sneaks into Snipes' house and puts it in his freezer. Spoiler alert. So yeah, it's like another psycho guy stalking someone. This is actually very underrated. I know a lot of people that don't like this movie. It did not do very well. I actually like it quite a lot. This is one that was directed by Kenneth Branagh, actually, who's known for his work in Shakespeare. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Back in the early 90s, there was sort of this movement of taking monster movies and classic pieces of literature like this and remaking them in big, serious ways in the way that the original novel is portrayed. They even put the author's name on it. So you have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is like directed by Kenneth Branagh. I think a couple years before, Francis Ford Coppola, who did the Godfather trilogy, he directed Bram Stoker's Dracula, which they're the same thing. It's just very close adaptations to the original novel. And they get a big actor, which De Niro plays the monster, Gary Oldman plays Dracula. Now, I will say, and this is a very young role by Helena Bonham Carter. Of course, this is before she met Tim Burton. And Robert De Niro, obviously, like that's actually the original cover, which I kind of wish they went with. He looks more like how he did in the original novel than Boris Karloff did in the 1931 Frankenstein, which I'm a huge fan of. I still like the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movies more than this. Those are my favorite monster movies, then Dracula. Frankenstein, Dracula, then probably Wolfman. At least those three. Bunch of other ones after. But like he has like long hair. He has like a glossy eye. He's kind of hunched over. He has a hair lip. We see him go from being really dumb to being really intelligent. He teaches himself to read and to speak. This movie is, how long is this shit? Oh, it's just over 2 hours, but it literally takes about over an hour before the monster even comes in. But I mean, Robert De Niro does a fine job. He like the scene where he helps the family by pulling the turnips or whatever they are out of the frozen ground. Then he meets the blind man, like in Bride of Frankenstein or the original novel, who becomes his friend. But then someone comes by and sees him and chases him out, and then he cries because he's ugly and no one likes him. He's very emotional. When he cries and weeps that he's ugly and nobody likes him, you feel bad for him. You do. But then, later on, when he's being a monster, he's fucking scary. So I guess he does a fine job. Just when it comes to Frankenstein or the monster himself, I'm more of a Boris Karloff fan. Alright, this movie's pretty crappy. That is Hide and Seek. I saw this when it first came out back in 2005. I was probably 14. Again, I knew who Robert De Niro was. I just wasn't super into him like I would be later. He's definitely phoning it in this movie. He doesn't give a good performance. He seems bored. Seems like he's just getting a paycheck. The movie itself is just a shitty... Is it even rated R? Oh, it is. The twist at the end was dumb. If you have to see every De Niro or even horror movie for that matter, I guess check it out. A Chilling Roller Coaster Ride by Richard Roeper. Sorry, I agree with you on Ghostbusters 2016, but not Hide and Seek. This movie I don't remember a thing about. This was back in my drinking days, so I don't remember it. But that is Ronin. This is probably the oldest movie I have of him. This is from 1973. That is Bang the Drum Slowly, based on the book. He's a baseball player who gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease and he's dying. I don't really remember that much about it. I do remember it being a good movie. But, there's parts where, in order to make himself feel sick, he used to do that thing where he spin around. He would eat a lot of food. Then he would do that thing with the baseball bat where you spin around, make yourself dizzy. Oh no, it wasn't food. He would put a lot of chewing tobacco in and then do that. So he would get nauseous and he would get really pale and sweaty. That's what he used to do to make himself look sick. Back when he first started being a method actor. If you're a sports fan or a De Niro fan, definitely check it out. I'm sorry, I don't remember that much about it. This movie I probably could have passed on because he's only in like 2 scenes, and that is Brazil. Yeah, it's by Terry Gilliam. Yeah, it's a Jonathan Pryce film. It's very imaginative. I mean, it's kind of like that movie Pi by Darren Aronofsky. Dystopian future. Just a really weird movie. I don't really remember a lot. But De Niro is like there in the top picture. He's like the heater repair guy, and he's only in it a couple times. It's known as one of the best sci-fi movies ever made, but I barely remember anything in it. And then the last thing I have is a 4-pack that I bought from Walmart because I couldn't find The King of Comedy anywhere by itself. So I bought this. I already had Raging Bull, I already had Ronin. Now I have those two and King of Comedy by itself. So I just keep this for Men of Honor. which is one of those like white people are evil movies. It's a true story about Carl Brashear. He was the first African American sailor for the American Navy, eventually diver for the American Navy. And, it shows the trials and tribulations that he went through being the first African American to get into the Navy as a sailor and as a diver. Because I think it's like the 60s. Sometime in the 60s, I think it is, when like boot camp and everything takes place. And like the general of it is played by, he's in Creepshow and he's in The Fog, Hal Holbrook. He's this old racist that doesn't want him to succeed. Robert De Niro is his drill instructor, who does a good job at playing not just a drill sergeant, but also a very racist one. Like, Cuba Gooding, he's the star of the film. He was a cook in the Navy. African Americans were usually cooks back then, I guess. So, De Niro's name for him is Cookie. He keeps calling him Cookie. And, he just keeps challenging him to things, thinking he'll fail. But eventually they become friends. The more Cuba Gooding succeeds and changes his life, the worse De Niro's life gets. He starts drinking and going downhill. And eventually they both need each other to help. I mean, some of it's kind of sappy in Hollywood, but the overall message, it's still a good movie. Actually, what year did that come out? 2000? I like Cuba Gooding Jr. Other than that OJ movie on Netflix, he hasn't been in much lately. They both, especially in boot camp, he has the attitude of I'll succeed no matter what. He has the attitude of you don't belong here, I'm going to get you out. And, it plays off each other very well. And again, that's Men of Honor. One that people don't talk about very much. So that's my collection. That's what I have. But, De Niro, he's been in all these great movies. But since 2010, he's been in shit. Like, I've redboxed a few. Like, he's one of those actors where you can put his name and his face on the cover or on the poster or whatever, and people are going to check it out because it's Robert De Niro. Like, I redboxed this movie called Red Lights, I think it's called, which is with Cillian Murphy and someone else. They go around debunking, like, these psychic people that talk to the dead. And Robert De Niro's this blind guy that apparently can do it. His name and face was on the fucking cover, and he was in it for less than 5 minutes. And the movie itself sucked ass. There was another one that was at Redbox for a while called Bagman. I never saw that. Like, he's been in such bad movies like that, I can't even remember what the fuck I saw. Hell, when Dirty Grandpa is one of the better movies you've been in recent years, that's a problem. Which, Dirty Grandpa, I didn't hate. But it felt like it tried too hard to be an R-rated comedy. What's that one movie? The real-life boxing movie just came out a couple years ago. The guy that fought Muhammad Ali and said, no mas. Or was it Ali or was it George Foreman? I think it was Muhammad Ali. He said no mas. Hands of Stone, Heart of Stone or Hands of Stone or something like that. He plays the trainer. He did well in that, but he's barely in it. There was Heist with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays Negan on The Walking Dead. They do the heist and it's on the bus. DeNiro's like the high rise kind of CEO or gangster type guy. He's on, his name and face is on the cover of that movie. He's barely in it, and he kind of gave an okay performance. There was that movie that was on HBO called Wizard of Lies. He was nominated for an Emmy. I saw the trailer. It looked really good. I wish it was on Netflix. I would like to see that. He looks like he actually really gave a good performance again, and that's good. I mean, even back in the day, even other performances he actually does something, doesn't mean it's good. I mean, he did that Rocky and Bullwinkle movie where he played fearless leader. You know, where he has the hair and the monocle, he's just like, in the beginning to the vegetables, or however fearless leader talks. I love Rocky and Bullwinkle, but that movie was bad. Even De Niro was bad. Fockers and Little Fockers was shit. Shark Tale I saw when it came out. I didn't realize he voiced the shark. Wouldn't mind seeing that again just to actually hear him do a voiceover. Yeah, there's a lot more movies I've seen that I just don't own. There's one he did called Stone, which is another one with Edward Norton that I never saw. A lot of the movies from the 60s, I think it's called Sam's Choice, or it's called The Gift. It has two different names. The store I go to has it, and that's like one of his very first ever movies. I should check that out. There was one, a lot of them you can't even get on DVD. Like in the 70s, he was like Pacino. He was turning out great movies one after another. He wasn't nominated for anything. It was called Last Tycoon, a guy that really helped turn Hollywood around. I think during like the 30s or 40s or 50s. That's not even on DVD. I know there's other ones I'm forgetting. Supposedly, it's done. It's already been filmed. It's just a matter if Netflix will let them put it in theaters or if it has to go straight to Netflix whenever that comes out. Directed by Scorsese. For the first time since 1995. It's going to star Robert De Niro. It's going to have Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel. It's also going to have Al Pacino, Ray Romano. Duh! Even Ray Romano I'm psyched for. He's been in a couple dramatic roles lately that I'm actually kind of surprised by. And it's a gangster flick. It's called The Irishman. I can't remember who the Irishman is, but that is Robert De Niro's character. Al Pacino is going to play Jimmy Hoffa. Wow. If that is the last movie they make, I can live with that. Because I can guarantee with the subject matter and it being directed by Scorsese, De Niro's going to give a passionate performance. He always has with Scorsese films. Hopefully that's what he needs to kind of wake up a little bit. I think that Wizard of Lies, I think, did him very well. Now hopefully this Irishman with Scorsese will get him to kind of do something. I mean, Pacino, he hasn't been in any good movies since 2010. I don't want Jack and Jill to be one of his lists. Fuck Jack and Jill with Adam Sandler. I would like to see, because, you know, De Niro, Pacino, Pesci, they're all like up in their 70s, mid to late 70s. I don't want movies like for De Niro, I don't want Dirty Grandpa and stuff like that to be what he goes out on. If being in a crime film directed by Scorsese is what he needs to feel like passionate again, had the incentive, or to be rejuvenated, whatever you want to call it, then so be it. I'm not saying I want to see him win an Oscar or a Golden Globe, or being at least nominated would be nice. But if he could at least give another performance that could make people say, wow, he still has it, or he should have been nominated. If he gets nominated, that'd be great. He probably won't unless it goes to theaters, because I don't think the Academy looks at Netflix films, but still, you could have this again. But, like, older guys, it's Scorsese again, and it's Pesci and De Niro with Al Pacino and Harvey Keitel. What more do you want? Whenever that movie comes out, again, if that movie does well, that could be the last movie he ever makes again, and I could be happy. He's had such a long, illustrious career that he deserves to have one more good movie. This was the last truly great movie he was in, and he was a supporting role, and that was 2013. That was 6 years ago. Other than that boxing movie he did, I think it's called Heart of Stone, and that Wizard of Lies looks really good. That Irishman could be what his career needs. But anyway, I can only hope. De Niro, he's my number one favorite actor. Again, you know, whether it's something he does with Scorsese, or, you know, it's just other movies that he's known for. He's a guy that he has the voice, he has the face of just someone that it intimidates and it commands the attention of the audience. And again, here's a good example. Whether he's a really sweet guy that you feel for and want things to go well, or he's a fucking creep and you can't sympathize with him whatsoever. Or his top 3 movies. You know, where it's just performance driven. You know, I don't know what more I can say, but Robert De Niro, he's been my number one favorite actor for a long time. Probably always will be. But yeah. If you want to see reviews on any of those, let me know down below in the comments. Other than that, the video wasn't as long as I thought, but hope you enjoyed. Again, a lot of these are on Netflix. Once Upon a Time in America, Heat, I think Awakenings, I think A Bronx Tale. But either way, find a way to check out Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, any of them. If you haven't seen any of these, check them out. Especially King of Comedy, Once Upon a Time in America, because nobody talks about those anymore. But anyway, hour and 3 minutes. Alright, that's all I got. Robert De Niro collection. John's out. Thank you.